They say love brings people together, but what if it blinds you to the truth? When I started questioning the strange behavior around our wedding plans, I uncovered more than financial secrets. This isn't just about money. It's about betrayal, control, and what happens when you finally stand up for yourself. My name's Mia. I'm 27 years old and the eldest child in a modest, hard-working family. My parents, Anna and Robert, have owned a charming little bakery in our small town for over 2 decades. Nothing luxurious, but we always had enough, and I grew up with solid values about work, money, and keeping your head down. Then there's Jake, my 25-year-old younger brother and, for lack of a better term, the golden boy. Growing up, he could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He was praised for showing up while I was expected to excel. It never bothered me much. I liked staying under the radar, focusing on school, work, and saving for my future. Things began to shift 5 years ago when my grandfather passed away. His will left me a trust fund, nothing outrageous but a decent sum. I couldn't access it until I turned 30, and even then, it was strictly for responsible use, education, buying property, starting a business. I was grateful. My plan was to eventually use it to either launch a small business or buy a place of my own. Then Jake got engaged. His fiancée, Emma, was one of those effortlessly charming people, social butterfly, high-end taste, polished in every way. At first, I liked her. She seemed warm and bubbly. But then came the dinner. We were all seated, enjoying a typical family meal, when Emma suddenly brought up my trust fund. She asked me, casually but pointedly, what I planned to do with all that money. I mumbled something vague. Maybe invest, maybe buy a flat. She lit up and said, "You're so lucky. Jake and I could really use some help with the wedding or even a deposit for a house." I laughed, assuming it was a joke, but her eyes didn't flicker. She stared, waiting for an answer. My parents quickly shut it down. "The money is Mia's. Not up for discussion," Dad said. That ended it for the night, but the seed was planted. And from that moment on, Emma didn't stop. Each time we met, she brought it up, first with sugary compliments, then with not-so-subtle nudges. "You're in such a fortunate position, Mia. It's rare for someone to help their family like this." Jake, quiet at first, began to echo her sentiments. "It's not like you're using the money right now," he said. I get why Emma's thinking about it. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. They weren't just hinting. They were planning. And soon, the pressure would go far beyond words. After that initial dinner, I tried to brush things off. Maybe Emma had been overly excited or misjudged the tone, but it wasn't going away. Every family gathering since, she'd dropped little comments like breadcrumbs, each one more pointed than the last. "You're so fortunate, Mia. I can't imagine what it must feel like to be in a position to really help the family." At first, I just laughed it off or changed the subject. But it kept happening. Jake, who had once been neutral, began to take her side openly. "You're not doing anything with it right now," he repeated. "It's just sitting there." It wasn't just the remarks. It was the growing sense that I was being cornered. I went to my parents hoping they would step in, but instead of backing me up, my mother gave me a strange look and said, "Emma just wants to feel like part of the family. She's not being pushy." I hadn't even used that word, but clearly, my mother had heard the tone. She just didn't seem to care. Then came the turning point. One evening, Emma pulled me aside after dinner. Her voice was calm, but firm, like someone rehearsing a speech. "Mia, I really think you should reconsider. Helping Jake and me would be a beautiful way to support the family. Don't you think it's a little selfish to hold on to money you're not even using?" Selfish. That word rang in my ears for days. I told her the money wasn't accessible yet, and even if it were, I had my own future to think about. She stared at me coldly and said, "I guess I misunderstood what kind of person you are." The next day, Jake rang me. "She was just stressed," he said. "But honestly, she has a point. You could help. You're in a good position." I started to question myself. Was I being selfish? Was I letting the money come between my family and me? I confided in friends. They all said the same thing. No, I wasn't wrong. It was my money, set aside for my future, with conditions. It wasn't even about the money. It was the entitlement. The assumption that I owed them simply because I had something they didn't. Still, the pressure didn't stop. Emma kept finding new ways to frame it. "A gift for the wedding," she said once. "Just a portion. It would mean so much." It wasn't a request anymore. It was a campaign. And slowly, the rest of my family was being drawn into it. It became clear the campaign was no longer just Emma's. My parents started nudging too, always under the guise of keeping the peace. At one point, my mum even said, "Jake's always had it harder, love. Maybe just think about what helping them could mean." Harder? Jake and I grew up in the same house, under the same roof, with the same parents and schooling. The only difference was I'd spent years saving, planning, and working steadily toward a future. Jake? He floated from one thing to another, never quite landing, but always cheered on for the effort. Still, I tried not to lash out. I figured I'd set boundaries calmly, stand firm, and eventually they'd drop it. Then came the ambush. Jake and Emma invited me to lunch, just the three of us. I assumed it was an attempt to smooth things over, but once I sat down, I knew I'd walked into a trap. After a few minutes of small talk, Emma leaned in. "We've been thinking, what if you gave us half the trust fund? You'd still have plenty left." "Half." Jake nodded in agreement. "It'd help us start our life together without all this stress. You're not using it yet, and we're family." That word again, family. A weapon dressed as a virtue. I said no, again, and explained for the 100th time that the trust fund wasn't even accessible, and even if it were, I wasn't obligated to give it away. They didn't hear a word. Within days, I got a call from my parents. "We want to have a family meeting," Dad said. I showed up to find Jake and Emma already there, sitting stiffly on the couch, like they were in a courtroom. "We just want to resolve the tension," Mum said, as if I'd caused it. Then Dad added, "Mia, maybe it's time to compromise. Not half, just something. A gesture." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, they were asking me to hand over money that wasn't available, money that was supposed to support my own future, just to keep Emma happy. They framed it as selflessness, as loyalty, as love. But I saw it for what it really was, manipulation wrapped in sentiment. I stood up and said it plainly. "I've worked hard for my future. I'm not selfish. I'm just done being guilt-tripped for protecting what's mine." I walked out that evening feeling sick, but strangely lighter. Jake and Emma stopped talking to me. My parents, cold and disappointed, left me with the weight of being the one who wouldn't bend. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fallout was swift. Emma, predictably, didn't take rejection well. She pivoted fast, from fake smiles to full-blown character assassination. She began painting me as the villain to anyone who'd listen. Extended family I hadn't spoken to in years started messaging me, parroting the same line. "Family is everything, Mia." Apparently, I was the greedy one now, hoarding money I couldn't even touch. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Then came the call that changed everything. It was my cousin Laura, the only one in the family still on my side. "Emma's been talking about you behind your back," she said, "telling people you don't care about Jake, that you only think about yourself. And she's been asking around about your finances." That last part floored me. Emma, poking into my private life. Rumor mongering was one thing. Financial snooping was something else entirely. That's when I decided to get a lawyer. I met with a local solicitor who specialized in estate law. I told her everything. Emma's comments, my family's pressure, the lunch ambush, the social media shade, and now the rumored background checks. She was stunned. "This could be construed as harassment," she said firmly. "Your trust is protected. but we may need to document everything and possibly send a formal cease and desist if this continues. It sounded extreme, but it also felt like my only option. I spent the next week collecting every message and email I could. Emma's subtle jabs, Jake's guilt-laden texts, even the frustratingly passive-aggressive ones from my mum. I compiled them all into a neat, time-stamped folder. It felt clinical, cold, like I was building a legal case against my own family. But Emma wasn't slowing down. She took to social media again. Vague posts, cryptic comments, things like, "It's so sad when money matters more than people." She never used my name, but the timing always coincided with a family blow-up. People started commenting with "Mia" and "So sorry you're going through this," confirming the subtext. Then, one of my coworkers pulled me aside at the office. "Just so you know," she said, "someone called HR pretending to be a relative. They were asking questions about your salary." That did it. I called my solicitor again and said, "Send the letter." The cease and desist went out the next morning. Firm, professional, and clear. Stop the manipulation. Stop the intrusion. Any further harassment would lead to legal consequences. A few days later, Jake called me, furious. "What the hell, Mia? You sent a legal letter to my fiancée? That's family." I answered calmly. Then she should have acted like it. Emma went quiet, but the damage was far from done. And what came next? No one saw it coming. The silence didn't last long. About a week after the cease and desist, I got a message. Anonymous, no name, just screenshots. Dozens of them. Someone had compiled Emma's deleted posts, private group messages, even fragments from a wedding planning Facebook group she used. What I read made my blood run cold. Emma hadn't just been bad-mouthing me. She had been planning to access my trust. In the messages, she openly discussed her plan to convince me to hand over the cabin as a gift for the wedding, and if that didn't work, to talk to her mum about applying emotional pressure. She even floated the idea of using Jake to make her feel guilty, like she's being selfish. It was all there, every manipulation, every lie. And the worst part, Jake had commented under some of them. I forwarded everything to my solicitor immediately. She took one look and said, "This changes everything. Not only was I now firmly protected against any future claims, but if they tried to retaliate, we had the receipts. Literally." I sat with the truth for a day before doing anything. Then I sent Jake a message, just one. "Take a good look at the woman you're marrying. Attached is everything. Don't respond." I never heard back from him, but 2 days later, I got a call from Laura. The wedding's off. Apparently, Emma tried to spin the narrative again, claiming I faked the messages, but too many people had seen them. Jake's own brother confirmed some of the conversations had happened, and Emma had used her own email for some of the planning. The unraveling was swift. Vendors began pulling out. Her parents were furious, not because of the ethics, but because of the embarrassment. Emma tried playing victim, but no one bought it anymore. And Jake? He moved back in with his parents and issued a public apology on Facebook. "I should have believed Mia. I failed to protect her. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I went to the cabin. For the first time in months, it was quiet. The lake was still. The air felt clean again. I spent a weekend there. No phone, no internet, just the warmth of a fire, and the knowledge that I'd stood up for myself when no one else would. My family never apologized, but some of them fell silent, which, in its own way, was a kind of peace. Emma moved out of town. Jake disappeared from social media. The scandal faded, as they always do, but not for me. For me, it became a defining chapter, one that taught me the value of boundaries, of documentation, and of choosing truth even when it costs you love. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped letting them destroy me. Now, I live on my own terms. And that cabin? It's not just mine because of a legal document. It's mine because I earned the right to peace, and no one's taking that away again. This story reminds me that sometimes Standing up for yourself means confronting your loved ones. But I have learned that self-respect and inner peace are more valuable than any relationship driven by greed. I choose the truth.